Hi, Pastor Steve here in beautiful Visalia, California. This is Happy Thoughts. We're under the category recently of stuff I have learned about the church along the way of an over 30-year time spent in ministry. Today, I want to talk about something in a more positive light. Here's a mystery and a beautiful sacred truth that I have learned about the church. In spite of the messiness of the way church is conducted, in spite of all the failures of leadership and the decline in numbers and the catastrophic losses that are besetting the form of Christianity as it exists in the church today, in spite of all of the negatives that we hear, the left and the right, with pulpit bullies telling the whole world what they have to do and say and think, demeaning people in the name of Jesus, in spite of all of the mess that is Christianity. In the church, at all levels of the church, from the local church clear up to the larger bodies that make up the church, there is an ongoing movement of the Spirit. That doesn't mean that everything the church says and does, or the way that they say and do things, is right. It does mean this, for me, that the Spirit of God and the message of God, the basics of a God who is reaching out to try to alleviate suffering in his children's hearts and bring them to a place of peace and bring them to a place where they can love other people. That work is always going on amidst the chaos of the political entity of the church and all of the rest of the negative stuff. I have seen it in my own life. I have had moments where God was very real to me and powerful to me when I was at annual conference or at general conference. And it has been startling to me to realize that things in those greater bodies of the Christian structure sometimes find a way through my own defense system and open me up to seeing things in a different way, or pursuing my life of faith in a different way, or even just confessing to Jesus after a long time closed down. So I talk harshly about the church and about its sins and about its depravities and about its nonsense. And I think that's just a necessary part of being a truth teller. But I thought this week that I would spend just a little bit of time talking about the deeper truth of the church, which is the church is, for whatever reason, the vehicle that God has chosen to announce salvation to the world. If you want to make an analogy, God is driving a 1962 Chevy Impala with one of the cylinders missing every now and then, and the muffler beginning to fall off and sparking behind it, and the paint long ago chipped off. If that's the vehicle God chooses to use, that's the vehicle God chooses to use. God definitely does use the church in all of its misery and in all of its nonsense. Here are a couple of examples of that that have been really important to me, and I hope will be beneficial to share with folks who watch this channel. Right now in our ministry in Visalia, we were asked by our conference to take on a little country church called Tipton United Methodist Church, and we did that. Tipton is a community, probably 80% or 90% Spanish-speaking individuals. It is a farm workers community, and the Tipton Church was built a long time ago, 1940s or 50s, maybe even earlier than that. And it was primarily an Anglo church when the city was primarily, or when the town was primarily Anglo folks and landowners and farmers. So what we have is a church that exists, a very small church that exists in an old way, a time of Anglo dominance and population numbers. It exists in that structure and in that way, and with people who are inheritors of the faith tradition from their parents and grandparents in a primarily Latino and Hispanic community that for which almost everything in life is different. So in conversations with the people of Tipton about, well, what does the future hold, right? The church is certainly not going to grow amongst or with Anglos, because the community has hardly any Anglos who actually live there. In fact, the people who make up the church as it exists now, many of them come from outside areas and come back to the Tipton church, and they support it and keep it alive because it's been very important to them in their life of faith. So in discussion with these fine folks, the saints of that church, about the future of it, they proffered that they think the best opportunity for their church, meaning the church building and the continued ministry of the church, would be in Spanish language ministry. And to that end, they have opened themselves up to continue to support the church financially and with their labor for food giveaways and other things, in order to make a possibility that the church could come into a Spanish-speaking worship service, and that they could develop ministries that would be powerful and impactful for the people who actually populate Tipton. Just pause there for a second and consider the miracle that happens in a divided nation, in a divided world, and in a divided denomination. A group of Anglo people who have really nothing to gain for themselves are laboring diligently and faithfully to keep their church alive long enough that we can develop ministries for Spanish-speaking people, mostly immigrants of one kind or another, to take over the church and to have a central part for their children's lives that centers in on the blessings of Christ and the church. We hear so much bad news, and I am guilty of that. It's refreshing and amazing to hear miraculous news that a group of people who stereotypically aren't supposed to care about immigrants or care about anything but themselves do, in fact, care a great deal about the community that many of them no longer live in, about the church that they isn't even the closest church to them. They care because they remember being saved there. They care because they carry a legacy of love and the gospel tradition from there, and they want to pass it on to a group now who looks different, who sounds different, and whose situation is different than theirs. So one of the things I've learned about the church is complain about it all we will, and there's lots to complain about, always something that we could be improving. The church is the vehicle in which Christ is bringing the gospel to the world. And if you watch closely and open yourself up to see the miracles that are unfolding, you will see miracles like the Tipton United Methodist Church's desire to turn their church and ministry into Spanish language ministry to continue to serve a community that no longer resembles the community that planted the church originally. That's just a beautiful and powerful example of what can happen in the church. The same thing happens not just on the local church level, but really, again, on every level of the church. Occasionally, grace breaks through the drama and the politics and the divisions and all the things that we do to defray the message. The grace of Jesus breaks through, and really powerful changes happen in folks' life. So we sit in a situation now where the church has been divided: Global Methodist Church and United Methodist Church. And in the remnants of the United Methodist Church, right there is catastrophic stuff going on everywhere. They're worried about how are they going to pay for retirement for the elders that are left. They're worried about how they're going to fund any kind of ministry going forward. And if the truth be told, they're massively distracted by the mistaken notion that they're a part of the Democratic Party to the point where they lay down the gospel in order to pick up the platform of whoever the Democratic leader is at the time. All of those things notwithstanding, as a part of the United Methodist Church, I understand my own role not to be to primarily fight against those that I disagree with or whose actions I think harm the church or take it away from its message. But my role as a Christian is to look for the miraculous, to understand that God drives the United Methodist Church the same as he does the Global Methodist Church, the same as he does the Southern Baptist Church, the same as he does all churches, right? We all have our problems. And to advocate for and look for the possibility of miraculous breakthroughs of the Spirit. In our church, we promote the concept of grace and living gracefully and being the first to forgive and really hewing close to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. That's kind of at the heart of who and what we are. And we see what I'm talking about all the time. We see families whose bonds are strengthened. We see people who reconnect with family members they haven't had anything to do with for a long time. We see the miracles that are unleashed when people actually act on the message of Jesus Christ. So today, I just want a very short message to say one of the things I've learned about the church is that in spite of the sin in the church, in spite of the frailty of the leadership of the church, myself included, in spite of all the things we do to mess up and get in the way of the message, etc., the church is constantly providing glimpses of miraculous power, healing, and new life. The church is, in fact, still the seed of resurrection. And maybe the seed is in the time when it's been planted in the ground and it begins to blow apart so that new life can begin. But the church, for all of its problems, is the receptacle of the grace of Jesus Christ, and it continues to work miracles in the strangest places and the strangest and most beautiful ways. So one of the things I've learned about the church, it was God's choice to create the church, knowing full well what the church was going to be like, and God made a good choice and has a vehicle that will continue to transport the gospel. If you're listening to this message and you're a Christian, I hope that it will help you join me, at least for this week, in an attitude of, instead of complaining all the time about what's wrong with the church, it really is time for those of us who want to take our discipleship seriously to advocate for and act in ways that will promote what's best in the church. And that is the Spirit of Christ, the Spirit of grace, and the Spirit of questing for a revitalized and resurrected life. So I hope you have a great day. I hope wherever you are, fall is breaking out all over and things are wonderful. And I'll be back next week to conclude the series on stuff I've learned in the church. Thank you for watching, and God bless.